Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, it is my honor and great pleasure for me to join you in these sessions. And I would like to extend my appreciations to CSIS in granting me an opportunity to be a part of this panel discussion. I just ended my duty as chair of the 59th session of the Commission on the Status of Women at the United Nations in New York. Interesting to know that the Commission undertook a review and appraisal of the implementation of the landmark documents called Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. I think the acronym is BDPA. After this, I would say BDPA. And the outcomes of the 23rd special session of the General Assembly, including current challenges that affect the implementation of the platform for actions and the achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of women, as well as opportunities for strengthening gender equality and the empowerment of women in the post-2015 development agenda through the integration of the gender perspective. As I said that this year we are reaching the 20-year mark since the adoption of the BDPA in 1995. And we have witnessed the progress in accelerating the implementation on Beijing declarations at international, regional, and national levels. Increasing awareness and commitments on women's empowerment and gender equality promotion have been made. At international level, one of the remarkable examples is the integration of a gender perspective in Security Council. The Security Council resolutions 1325 and other related resolutions have introduced a gender perspective into high politics regime. At regional level, for example, the ASEAN has an effort in mainstreaming a gender perspective into its 3 pillars. At national level, advancement of women can be illustrated by number of laws, policies, and strategies to advance women's rights and gender equality in many countries. Remarkably, in worldwide collective actions in fighting against violence against women, we call it VOWs, a zero tolerance on VOWs, and advocate for women's rights and gender equality, such as He for She campaign have been conducted worldwide, as you know. Within all the positive changes, we have recognized, as indicated in the political declaration adopted at the 59th sessions of the CSW, that progress on women's empowerment and gender equality promotion has been slow and uneven. That major gaps remain, and that obstacles, for instance, the barriers, structural barriers, persist in the implementation of the Beijing declarations. Significant levels of inequality between women and men, girls and boys persist globally, and that many women and girls experience multiple and intersecting forms of discriminations. The vulnerability and marginalizations throughout their life cycle, as well as a gap between, that's very important, de jure and de facto, the phenomena. Regarding the topic of women's empowerment and gender equality, these 2 issues are interrelated. We must have the firm concept that women's rights are human rights, and the human rights are women's rights. That is for sure the thing that we have to think about. To empower women, I would like to highlight the main 4 key strategies for a successful women's empowerment, namely knowledge, opportunity, women's friendly environment, and innovation. I also would like to take this opportunity to share with you some examples of the implementation of Thailand, where I come from, regarding the empowerment of women. The first key, that is knowledge and education, are one of the main tools for women's empowerment. In Thailand, we provided universal access to formal education for all. In addition, lifelong learning through the informal and non-formal education is provided to enhance women's potential and skill development. For instance, the Community ICT Center have been launched, aimed at empowering people with informal information technology skills, as well as access to information for self-learning and self-development. In addition, capacity building and skill training are provided to guarantee that women are continuously equipped with knowledge to respond to the diverse of the economy and labor markets. Secondly, when women and girls are equipped with knowledge and a competitive ability in the market, the second key to empower is to create an opportunity for women. Creating opportunity means that women must have opportunities in accessing all resources, from the capital to information. To access capital, Thailand has taken measures to ensure equal access to loans and credits. Many loans and credits, such as the People's Credit from the Government Savings Bank and the microcredit for women entrepreneurs, are granted to increase the access of women to capital. Also, some funds enhance an ability of women in fund management. For example, the National Development Fund for Women provides not only an opportunity for women to access to capital, such as a revolving fund for vocational development and an income creation, but the fund also provide an opportunity for women's organizations to conduct projects to promote gender equality as well. In terms of access to information, the e-training system and distance learning centers in the community have been initiated to promote women's competitive capacity, especially access to information on income generations, community knowledge exchange, as well as their rights. That is very important. The third key is to establish women's friendly environments. Women's friendly environment should be implemented both at the macro and micro levels. At the macro level, women's empowerment could start at home. In this regard, Thailand attaches its importance to promote gender equality starting at home through the series of knowledge workshops and materials on the issues of gender equality, and also on the issues of the unity of the family. In addition, educational institutions are taking measures to eliminate gender bias and stereotype in textbooks and curricula. It sounds very, very strange to people that are not used to these issues, but it did have effect on the equality between the boys and girls, from the very start, when we have the gender stereotype in the way that men and women are not treated equally. Thailand set up the Subcommission on Gender Curriculum to conduct a review on dimensions of gender inequality that exists in all levels of education, of textbooks, teaching tools, and materials. The study significantly leads to a suggestion that on policies and measures to promote gender equality in education. In workplace, in fact, the states should guarantee equal wage, fair and non-discriminatory treat. For example, the amendment of the Labor Protection Act should ensure that the better protection of women and children, such as, designing the maximum working hours and protection for subcontract workers to receive fair remunerations and welfare. Alongside with the legislations, this is the case of Thailand, we realize that double burden hinder women to access the market. Therefore, specific policy guidance has been launched to establish women's friendly environments in workplaces, for example, promoting the establishment of daycare centers in workplaces and industrial estates to lessen childcare responsibility. Also, the cabinet resolution and all the regulation on parental leave for male government officials were approved. Well, unfortunately, it happened just only in the public sector, but not the private one. That to have the parental leaves for males, government officials. So this is the reality. I think that somehow in the futures, the private companies will take the same, looking at to lessen the burden of women, to raise the child. In my capacity of Thailand's representative to ASEAN Commission on the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Women and Children, or we call it ACWC, I work closely with the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security to raise awareness in ASEAN regarding the elimination of violence against women and girls. The annual public campaign to stop violence against women, led by Thailand, has been going on for several years with a different themes each year. In 2012, the campaign started to raise public awareness to end violence against women. In 2013, the campaign highlighted domestic violence that affected women and children. And in 2014, we focused on the violence against the elderly women in the society in ASEAN. So the campaign materials and website have continually developed for this purpose. Now, the last key in empowering women is innovation. And innovation will accelerate the achievement in women's empowerment. Realizing this, Thailand has continually launched new projects to respond challenges on the empowerment of women. For instance, on the issue of women's peace and security agenda, series of workshops to build a capacity of women in peace processes have been launched. Parallel with the empowerment of women, the protection of gender equality by all sectors should be done as states adopted at the opening session of the 59th session of CSW through, I would like to read outlines, altogether 6. One is to strengthen implementation of laws, policies, strategies by closing a gap between written documents and real practices. 2, strengthen and increase support for institutional mechanisms for gender equality at international, regional, and national levels. 3, the transformation of discriminatory norms and gender stereotypes. 4, significantly increase investment for gender equality to close the resource gaps. 5, strengthens accountability for the implementation of existing commitments. And 6, enhance capacity building, data collection, monitoring, and evaluations. So, to conclude, women's empowerment and gender equality promotion is, well, everybody knows that it's the unfinished business, that it will go on forever. We must look ahead to the post-2015 and beyond. At international levels, various organizations ranging from the CSW, UN Women, UNICEF, to the treaty bodies like CEDAW, that is the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women in All Forms. Some of us here might hear it. I have heard it for the first time, but it's the conventions, the UN conventions, whereby the member states will have to look at the structures of practices in having women and men in the equal status, and looking at the elements with the concluding observations from the committee every time that member states will produce the report, and also to defend the report with the committees, verbally. So that is something that the member states will have to do. It's the legal binding, in fact. It's the legal binding. As I said that, all the, at international levels, various agencies ranging from CSW, UN Women, UNICEF, and also some other treaty bodies, such like CEDAW, should work towards contributing to the achievement of gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. Synergies among and between these agencies within the UN system should be further strengthened so that we can fully reap benefits of our shared goals. At regional level, mechanisms in each region should strengthen their collaboration and cooperation in working on women's rights and gender equality agenda. At national level, governments with stakeholders should work closely to create positive change in the lives of women and girls. So, ladies and gentlemen, looking ahead of the post-2015 development agenda, I hope that all of our common goals will be met someday, sooner or later. That is to ensure women and girls are drivers, actors, and beneficiaries of sustainable development. And not one of them is left behind. That is to make sure that the post-2015 development agenda is a truly inclusive agenda with gender equality at its core. And that is to ensure that all stakeholders step up their efforts towards the realization of gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. So thank you for your attention.
Kanda, thank you very much. Very interesting and insightful. And I made a mistake at the introduction. I was going to mention that, unfortunately, Kanda was going to have a partner, Ms. Stephanie Foster, who's a senior advisor from Secretary Kerry's Office on Global Women's Issues at the Department of State. Unfortunately, she became ill and let us know just around noon that she would not be able to make it. So unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, Kanda is on the podium by herself, but you're going to do fine. Could I maybe, just to start the conversation, you several times referred to the post-2015 Millennium Development Goals agenda. Can you, based on the discussions you had in New York the last few weeks, do you have a sense of what the goals will be with specific regard to women and girls?
Oh, okay. I would like to say that the post-2015 is something that, well, I put it in a very simple way like this. The historic Beijing Declaration is there. The platform for action is there. It's not going to be away. But what we would like to see is that, as we can see from the 20 years, that because the pace of development is not that satisfactory and uneven, so on the post-2015, at least from the policies of the CSW, that we need to have tighten the measures a little bit, to look at the elements that will help women to go forward. For example, one, we have the political declarations. At the beginning of the CSW 59 sessions, the political declaration is a kind of commitment from the political people, that is so-called ministers from the member states, to make sure that after post-2015, we will have the measures to help, for example, to have to look at the monitoring systems. That is, the mechanisms will have to be put in place, even though the CSW is not a kind of legal binding mechanisms, but we need to have the follow-up, the monitoring, and also evaluation mechanisms to look at what is the gaps that still appears and what kind of remedial actions that we should have. Secondly, I think that the emphasis is also on the increased participation, the urge to increase participation from the NGOs to help just not only the function or the mandates of the member states or the government of that member states to look at the way and how to accelerate it by itself, but it needs some kind of collaboration more from the NGOs. The participations, is the things that we have discussed a lot. And also the element of, to make sure that the resource has been provided for the member states, to make sure that they have earmarked, the resource to boost, or to to help accelerate the implementation of the Beijing. We have had a lot of examples, the incidents that while we have the mechanism available in countries, but all those mechanisms didn't have the earmarked resource for themselves. So they just, have the mechanism just like, the knight without the sauce, something like that. So it's something that we need to look at it seriously from post-2015.
So we'll open the floor to questions. If you would like to ask a question, raise your hand. There's somebody with a microphone back there. And please identify yourself and try to ask a question. Please.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for speaking to us today. My name is Jocelyn Roberts. I am the Lower Mekong Initiative Coordinator for the Department of State. And I'm curious if you can share with us maybe some lessons or best practices. I have two questions. One is, how do you manage to increase the access to resources, to capital, or information, as you mentioned, in rural areas? And the second one is that on the sidelines of the Commission on the Status of Women, we had a small meeting with the LMI representatives, and the
You mean the side event?
Yeah, just a small informal side event. And the Lao Vice President of the Commission for the Advancement of Women mentioned that their approach is that education is the single most important factor in advancing women. But again, how do we break through? Some of the Southeast Asian countries have very good education, primary education, enrollment of girls, etc. But when we get to secondary or tertiary levels, the enrollment and the graduation levels drop off significantly. So what can we do to try to maintain or sustain and improve the education of girls in secondary school and then also in higher education? Thank you very much.
Can I just I'm not quite sure whether I would be able to answer, or to help you on that or not. But from the experience of Thailand, we do have the evidence that we have very few dropouts, of students at secondary levels. We have more girls, more women in the universities right now. Even from the departments of engineering, we now have something like 50-50 men and women. Medical science, 50-50. Yeah, let alone your liberal arts, that we have a lot of women's already, or educations. Well, I think that it has something to do with the long-term plans of whether it's the Ministry of Education, the government, or the university management, to look at the elements. Why is it that what kind of problems that the girls have in secondary educations, particularly in the rural areas? I think that we have quite a number of best practices, so to speak, that apart from having our own students in school, we also have quite generous to have, you know, the boys and girls, you know, who accompany their mothers as the migrant workers to be, you know, to be accepted and then to be educated in school. So I feel that we don't have much problem on that, but I cannot say about the Lao PDRs because the situation is not the same. And I think that the Thai government is quite generous right now, you know, to accommodate all the boys and girls, you know, to accompany their parents as migrant workers, you know, to be educated in country. I forget your first question already. Please, could you start it over again, please?
How do you manage to assure access to informational and financial resources for women in rural areas?
I think that on that issues, there is one thing that I would like to mention. We have the Women's Development Funds initiated by the government, and it's quite a number, quite a big amount of budgets to be distributed for each, you know, 77 provinces, and then to make sure that the fund has been allocated to help women's organizations within the province to tap, you know, the resources for their own endeavors, business endeavors, and also, you know, to help, you know, the groups of women's a kind of you know, their own endeavors, business or economic endeavors. And it's revolving fund, you know, it's going on like this for several years. Apart from that, we also have the before the Women's Development Fund, we also have the well, I think about, you know, my own term, but I cannot translate it into English. It is the funds allocated for each sub-districts, so that we will have the, you know, each district, the sub-district, we will have the members of the committees, you know, to look after the funds, to get the loan. For those who will get the loans, will have to submit the proposal to the commissions, the committees, and the committees will have the very neutral. We have the equal numbers of men and women, you know, looking after, you know, the proposals, and then approve for the loans. But that is not just only women, but men and women equally can access that loans. But the Women Development Fund, it's purely on women. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your comments today. My name is Leanne Sadowski, and I work at an economic development consulting firm called Nathan Associates. And we are doing a lot of work with both APEC and ASEAN on support of their women's agenda. and on the APEC side with the PPWE, and then on the ASEAN side through the Secretariat. I have 2 questions for you. Number 1, for ASEAN, you mentioned that you're working with ASEAN to integrate women into the 3 pillars, and I was just wondering what are the types of activities ASEAN is looking to do in the future. I did an assessment of ASEAN 3 or 4 years ago, and women are mentioned nowhere within any of the pillars. I think there's one reference in the social pillar. And so I was just wondering what you hope ASEAN can do in the future in terms of supporting women, particularly women's and on the economic sector, which is my particular interest. And then my second question is more personal. As an American woman who is a recent new mother, I have realized that the United States doesn't do much to support working women and women's economic participation. Thailand is well known for how it supports women, and I was just wondering how Thailand was able to make women part of its policy agenda. What particular advice would you have for women in the United States to try to make women more of a political body to force change? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your questions. The first one is on the gender mainstreaming in the 3 pillars of ASEAN. Well, to tell you the truth, it's only just begun. Yes, yeah, because it has been discussed for a long time, because we have, the first pillar is on the security and political. Second pillar is on the economics, and my pillars is on the social and cultural, communities. Actually, most of the time it condensed in the 3rd pillars, but not the second and not the first, because they think that no, it's irrelevant. But it's time now. It's time now that it should have we should have a cross-cutting gender mainstreaming across the three pillars, in the way that we need to have first of all, we should also have the notions on when we have the feasibility studies or look at the analysis of the projects, from the 3 pillars, we need to have, a set of questions ourselves. What kind of the policies or the projects or the activities that will affect, the life of women. We also have to have in our mind that when we call what I would like to say that, for example, in economics, we need to ask ourselves that if we have these activities for the implementation, who benefits, men or women? What kind of the adverse effects if women will have, if we have these kind of projects going on, for example, on the climate change, on the projects on the economic incubators or something like that. Whether we have these aggregated data among ourselves to look at the distributions of those who will be affected. It's quite difficult to understand and to perceive, from those who are not familiar with these issues. But I tell you that it will have to be in the policies of ASEAN, and we will try to make it, more evidence so that we can say that, across the 3 pillars, we have the gender perspective. Look at things with the gender lenses, so that we have the equal status between men and women. Okay. The second questions, very difficult to answer, but we put it this way. We have the 10 years women development plans integrated into the National Development Plan of Thailand. And with that, there will be the parts that will deal with, the notion that, the situation where women can be, the equal income earners as men, right? But women also have, the invisible burden at home that will not be able to shed it away very easily. For example, to look after, the children at home, to have cook for the families, and sometimes, well, not sometimes, the working mother. If they have the, ability to pay for the nursery, to look at the infants or something like that, it's okay. But if they are the low-income earners, how can they, afford this kind of nursery? Drop off the kids, in the morning, and then pick them up in the after work, and also it's costly. It's quite costly, So the policy is that it's a kind of CSR for the private organizations and also the publics to initiate to have, the child care center within the workplace, so that mom will come and look at the the kids, or even the breast feedings, so at the corner. So this is something that we can empower women, to be able to work at the same time, to look after the kids, the infants at the same time, without too much cost in their life. So this is something I would like to share with you. We are doing for quite some times, but I cannot say that it's 100%. It depends on the policies of the organizations, particularly the big private companies, that will have the eyes on the lens of the gender lens or not. At one time, I think about 2 months ago, there's one company saying that it's the announcement that female laborers for this year, you are not supposed to be pregnant. And then we put it in the media, and then they have to stop. That is women's right, right? Yes.
So we have a bunch of questions. We're almost up. Well, we can maybe run a bit over. Maybe we'll take 2 questions at a time. So I'll ask you 2 to ask questions, and we'll do the other 2. So we'll start here. Mindy, could you give her the, and then her. So
I'm sorry, I don't know if I do have a question. My name is Mindy Cutler. I direct a nonprofit called Asia Policy Point that studies Japan and Northeast Asia. As you can see, the gender perspective in the bastion, the alpha male bastion hasn't gotten through. CSIS is where the men are, and they don't really understand gender as part of foreign policy. One of the big issues in the UN and in the women's organizations is the violence against women in warfare. And one of the big issues in Washington, which I work on, and probably the only person that works on, is the comfort women issue. And that comes up in your commission, it comes up in CEDAW. What is your perspective on that?
And then let's take two questions here.
My name is Emmanuel Siu. I am a human rights lawyer and researcher on democracy from Central European University. Thank you for doing us the honor of your presence today. You mentioned a quite impressive list of policy fields where initiatives have been taken, like education, new technology, culture, social development, and banking. And my question regarding that is how both at the UN level, but also the national level, how does work in practice, the cooperation between the different offices that takes care of these different fields? And for example, you mentioned that you work now with the Minister of Social Development and Security. Maybe it is because you held that position before. So how does this work in practice? And is this cross-field approach successful? And if not, what are the next steps to do for that? Thank you.
No, we'll let her answer these two questions, and we'll do one more round. Thanks.
Frankly speaking, I cannot see clearly on when you said that the violence against women during the warfare, right? You said that. Well, and I think that this is something that we need to look at it as well. That somehow, in the past, there are a lot of when you have the unrest or the situations, most of the time it will be the males that will look at the issues, whether the negotiations or the helps to help all the women's. Now we try to have more women, to work as the helpers, and to be within the negotiations, to have the gender balance when we have the situation. So I think that something we need to ponder as well, that it's just not just only men that will be able to look at all the elements, but we need to have the perception or the attitudes or the ideas, understanding of women's, to be in the process as well. As I told you, that it's not, women is not just only seen as the victims, but they should be, the helpers, the one that will be on the helping side as well. So this is we think that in the future we will see more of gender balance in all the situations. I know that it's not going to be 100%, but you will see more women in the UN systems.
Do you have a comment on the comfort women or no?
Again, I'm very absent-minded. I forgot your questions already.
Thank you. My question was, how does work the cooperation at the national and the UN level between the different offices? So the one that takes care of the social development, new technologies, the banking system, education.
Okay.
And if it's not successful enough, how can we make it better? Thank you.
Okay. It is not legal binding, because member states will come and then report annually on what kind of achievements that they will have. And next year, the theme will be on the sustainable development for women's sustainable development. So that is something very vast areas. So it depends on the member states. Will look, you look at the political declarations, the element of the political declarations, that what kind of specific measures, policies that they have already committed within the declarations. They pledge, at the beginning of the 59th sessions that they will do so and so and so and so. So in the following years, they will come back with the evidence that what they have done on what respects. I think that not many member states will say that they will report on the wide arrays of activities that they have done in the past 12 months. It's impossible. But I think that it will be some kind of, the noticeable or the things that they have done after going back to the capitals. What kind of policies, what kind of legislations, what kind of measures that they put forward, for example, on the earmark of the resources for gender equality in the capitals. To what extent they have done that, and what is the drawbacks, what is the challenges, or something like this. So this is the way that the UN, and with the help of the UN Women's in the regional located in each member states or not, I don't know, but with the mandates of the UN Women's and also other UN organizations, as they try to have the synergies to work together, as to help the member states to overcome the gender inequality in their own countries. That is the thing that we can do.
Please, and then, so the last two people in the back there, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Kunying, thank you so much. My name is Rita Heron Adkins. I had lived in Thailand. I had the opportunity to enjoy Sanuk, Sanuk Makmak. I speak a little, if I may brag, a little bit of Thai, but that's all the Thai that I happen to know. My question, ma'am, is human trafficking. Thailand, the Philippines are among the countries in Southeast Asia and that part of the world which are in the list among the top countries impacted or involved in human trafficking. And human trafficking, of course, covers slave labor as well as sex trafficking. Now, of course, when it comes to human trafficking and the sale of women for sex, okay, while it is an income-generating kind of livelihood, or maybe that's not the wrong word, of earning money, and that's why poor countries and women in poor countries are sort of kind of led or lured into that kind of industry. This may not necessarily be part of this central theme of your presentation today, but since it relates to women or it involves women, what kind of comment would you have regarding human trafficking where it involves women in your country? Thank you so much.
My name is Luke Wilson. I'm a professor at the George Washington University. My question is about the impact that political instability or governmental instability can have on the advancement or implementation of these gender rights. Does it at some times create opportunities for advancement, for quick advancement, or do you more often see retrenchment, a retreat back to sort of more stable and more stable goals, things that don't actually need to be changed? Thank you.
The first question, I think that the human trafficking is because the situation, but because the location of Thailand is we have a lot of borders, right? To Laos, to Burma, to Myanmar, to Malaysia, to Cambodia. Thailand is seen as the country of destination a lot, but it doesn't mean that we ignore the situations that will on the human trafficking situation in our countries. I think that we have a lot of MOUs, with the neighbors, and also the special task force, the intergovernmental, interministerials also task force that to look at the elements of trafficking, including the police as well. I think that it would well I feel that because of the the ASEAN communities is going to be by the end of this year, then it will be the free flow of people coming into Thailand, out of Thailand a lot. A lot of frequencies, a lot of work volumes, and what kind of activities, both legal and illegal, coming in. I will say that the Thai government is very aware of the problems, and we try our best to decrease the cases, and also to look at the service that we will look at the victims, human trafficking. I think it's quite generous, to look at we have all the emergency homes in 108 emergency homes altogether all over the countries, to look after the identified victims of trafficking, and then to make sure that they will be reintegrated, to look at the access to justice as well. That is the normal the policies, and also the measures that we have. Otherwise, we will not. It used to be just only 5 or 6 emergency homes altogether all over the countries, but now it's 100. Yeah, on all over the countries. So it means something that Thai government is not close their eyes, on the problem of human trafficking. Yeah. We try. Definitely, we have it. We have it. The rehabilitation programs for the victims. If you go to Nonthaburi, we always Gretakan, you know the name of these emergency homes or not, but it's the biggest emergency homes for women victims for human trafficking. And in that we have all kind of vocational trainings, and also we all even have the lawyers to help them to to access the justice, and also we have the MOU with the sender countries, the sender governments, how to reintegrate them back home and not to be re-victimized again. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The second question. My personal opinion is that the change of government is not alter the probability for women to be elected as the MPs or even in the local communities. It doesn't change anything at all. But what I would like to say is that instead of looking at whether how many women to be elected, nationwide or locally, elections, I care more on how to have the capacity building for women to prepare themselves to be ready to be elected, and not just only to stay home, and looking after the children, the kids, and then let the men just to be the candidates of the elections. That is the more important. I think that is what we could do, is to help women to know themselves that you are the same as women of men. You are able, to be elected the same as men. Just only to have confidence and to have the preparedness, to open themselves to the public and to be elected. So that's my answer.
Okay, Kanda, thank you very much for your insightful and interesting presentation and answering our questions. I'd like to also thank everybody that's come. Please join me in thanking Kanda for coming down from New York to talk about what happened there.
Thank you. Thank you. Through the series of knowledge workshop and materials on the issues of gender equality, and also on the issues of the unity of the family. In addition, educational institutions are taking measures to eliminate gender bias and stereotype in textbooks and curricula. It sounds very, very strange to people that are not used to these issues, but it did have effect on the equality between the boys and girls, from the very start, when we have the gender stereotype in the way that men and women are not treated equally. Thailand set up the sub-commission on gender curriculum to conduct a review on dimensions of gender inequality that exists in all levels of education of textbooks, teaching tools, and materials. The study significantly leads to suggestion that on policies and measures to promote gender equality in education. In workplace, in fact, the states should guarantee equal wage, fair and non-discriminatory treat. For example, the amendment of the Labor Protection Act should ensure that the better protection of women and children, such as, designing the maximum working hours and protection for subcontract workers to receive fair remunerations and welfare. Alongside with the legislations, this is the case of Thailand, we realize that double burden hinder women to access the market. Therefore, specific policy guidance has been launched. Yes, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, it is my honor and great pleasure for me to join you in these sessions. And I would like to extend my appreciations to CSIS in granting me an opportunity to be a part of this panel discussion. I just ended my duty as chair of the 59th session of the Commission on the Status of Women at the United Nations in New York. Interesting to know that the Commission undertook a review and appraisal of the implementation of the landmark documents called Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. I think the acronym is BDPA. After this, I would say BDPA. And the outcomes of the 23rd special session of the General Assembly, including current challenges that affect the implementation of the platform for actions and the achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of women, as well as opportunities for strengthening gender equality and the empowerment of women in the post-2015 development agenda through the integration of the gender perspective. As I said that this year we are reaching the 20-year mark since the adoption of the BDPA in 1995. And we have witnessed the progress in accelerating the implementation on Beijing declarations at international, regional, and national levels. Increasing awareness and commitments on women's empowerment and gender equality promotion have been made competitive ability in the market. The second key to empower is to create an opportunity for women. Creating opportunity means that women must have opportunities in accessing all resources from the capital to information. To access capital, Thailand has taken measures to ensure equal access to loans and credits. Many loans and credits, such as the People's Credit from the Government Savings Bank and the microcredit for women entrepreneurs, are granted to increase the access of women to capital. Also, some funds enhance an ability of women in fund management. For example, the National Development Fund for Women provides not only an opportunity for women to access to capital, such as a revolving fund for vocational development, and income creation. But the fund also provide an opportunity for women's organizations to conduct projects to promote gender equality as well. In terms of access to information, the e-training system and distance learning centers in the community have been initiated to promote women's competitive capacity, especially access to information on income generations, community knowledge exchange, as well as their rights. That is very important. The third key is to establish women's friendly environments. Women's friendly environment should be implemented both at the macro and micro levels. At the macro level, women's empowerment could start at home. In this regard, Thailand attaches its importance to promote gender equality starting at home. At international level, one of the remarkable examples is the integration of a gender perspective in Security Council. The Security Council resolutions 1325 and other related resolutions have introduced a gender perspective into high politics regime. At regional level, for example, the ASEAN has an effort in mainstreaming a gender perspective into its 3 pillars. At national level, advancement of women can be illustrated by number of laws, policies, and strategies to advance women's rights and gender equality in many countries. Remarkably, in worldwide collective actions in fighting against violence against women, we call it VOWs, a zero tolerance on VOWs, and advocate for women's rights and gender equality, such as He for She campaign have been conducted worldwide, as you know. Within all the positive changes, we have recognized, as indicated in the political declaration adopted at the 59 sessions of the CSW, that progress on women's empowerment and gender equality promotion has been slow and uneven. That major gaps remain, and that obstacles, for instance, the barriers, structural barriers, persist in the implementation of the Beijing declarations. Significant levels of inequality between women and men, girls and boys persist globally, and that many women and girls experience multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination. The vulnerability and marginalizations throughout their life cycle, as well as a gap between, that's very important, de jure and de facto, the phenomena. Regarding the topic of women's empowerment and gender equality, these 2 issues are interrelated. We must have the firm concept that women's rights are human rights, and the human rights are women's rights. That is for sure the thing that we have to think about. To empower women, I would like to highlight the main 4 key strategies for a successful women's empowerment, namely knowledge, opportunity, women's friendly environment, and innovation. I also would like to take this opportunity to share with you some examples of the implementation of Thailand, where I come from, regarding the empowerment of women. The first key, that is knowledge and education, are one of the main tools for women's empowerment. In Thailand, we provided universal access to formal education for all. In addition, lifelong learning through the informal and non-formal education is provided to enhance women's potential and skill development. For instance, the Community ICT Center have been launched, aimed at empowering people with informal information technology skills, as well as access to information for self-learning and self-development. In addition, capacity building and skill training are provided to guarantee that women are continuously equipped with knowledge to respond to the diverse of the economy and labor markets. Secondly, when women and girls are equipped with knowledge and